Hey folks, my name is Benjamin Quinn, and today I'm going to be talking about telework. First, I'm going to define what telework is, talk about who telecommutes, some statistics, pros and cons, and finally, I'm going to talk about how you'd go about setting up telecommuting at your company if you chose to do so. So, in order to define what telework is, we first have to define what telecommuting is. An article from Global Workplace Analytics defined telecommuting as the substitution of technology for travel. So this is obviously the most simplified definition that you could pretty much come up with, and it doesn't really define a time frame as to how much the employee needs to telecommute in order for them to be a teleworker. So I chose to use a more specific definition, which is from the New York Times, which is someone employed full-time at a private nonprofit or government organization who works at least half of the time at home. So it's important to define a time frame in order to understand the statistics that I'm going to talk about later in the presentation. So who telecommutes? From the same New York Times article, they define a typical telecommuter as a 49-year-old college graduate man or woman who earns about $58,000 a year and belongs to a company with more than 100 employees. So this basically just describes your average white-collar employee. Yeah. Now some statistics about telecommuting. Global Workplace Analytics says that there's about 3.7 million employees now working from home at least half of the time. So that's about 2.5% of the workforce in the United States. They claim that 50% of jobs are telework compatible, which essentially means that 50% of people could work potentially, I guess, like one day a month or so from home. That's not to say that 50% of jobs could be done from home. That's ridiculous, obviously. And they say 20 to 25% currently telecommute in some capacity. So again, that means that about 1 in 5 people work from home at some given point in the month, basically. So yeah, they claim to get some of these statistics from the census, but it also says that basically on the census there's just a checkbox that says works from home, which is obviously very ill-defined, and so it's pretty hard to actually get real statistics on this. In Green IT, they use a statistics from a research organization, IDC, that states that 8.9 million Americans worked at home at least 3 days a month in 2004, which is pretty specific, so that's pretty good. But that's also 10 years old, so I chose not to. I'm not really going to talk about that. So the benefits of telecommuting are first and foremost that it reduces your environmental impact. So basically, you don't have to provide your employees with workspace, so you don't have to worry about any of the heating, cooling costs, just costs of owning the real estate. You can consolidate basically all of your office space and only have office space for occasional meetings for those employees. Yeah, the next point is a little bit redundant, I guess. You don't need to you don't need to provide office space, so you're gonna save there, which is probably the biggest benefit for most managers. Finally, I chose to include that it helps employees with disabilities. So if you have a disability, you're probably going to have the majority of the amenities that you need at home already. Now, I'm sure that you would probably be legally have to provide them with a lot of the amenities if they need additional resources, but I still think that that would be an net gain for most companies. Some of the downsides to telecommuting are that management needs to buy into it. Green IT says that this is actually the biggest hurdle for most companies because as a manager, naturally, you want to be able to see what your employees are doing, and if they're working at home, you can't do that. Um, so obviously, you'll need to set up some sort of monitoring system. Um, yeah. Also, there's training required for the people working at home and the people working in the office. They have to be able to communicate properly with each other in an efficient manner, which can be a pretty big hurdle to overcome. Lastly, there's infrastructure that's required. So you would need to have ways for your employees working at home to properly communicate with people working in the office, employees, managers working in the office, which could probably be a fairly large upfront cost, other than the fact that you're downsizing most of the time when you're doing. So now I'm going to talk about how you'd go about setting up telecommuting at your company if you wanted to do that. First, you had to have to determine whether your company was eligible for telecommuting at all. Obviously, if you are talking about hands-on work where, I don't know, like construction or something, that's obviously impossible. That wouldn't make any sense. So, yeah, it's important to determine whether this is even an option for you before you start thinking about what you need to do. Probably the most important point here is setting up performance standards because so you'll have to find performance standards for your current employees so that your employees working remotely will you'll be able to compare their performance to your current employees and know if they're getting the amount of work done that they need to be getting done. So that's going to really put you at ease as a manager if you can see the numbers that they're actually getting done what you want them to. Next is workstation compatibility. Basically, you have to go into every employee's house and see if they have the proper equipment. See if to work efficiently. See if they have an ergonomic workstation, etc. You'd also have to do periodic checks of their workstation at home to make sure that it's safe and that they have everything that they need. Finally, you need opportunities for meeting in person. An employee just simply won't be productive if they can't meet with the rest of their team, management and employees included. So yeah, you need to have some office space where they can come in and talk to other employees and managers, and yeah, that's important. Okay. Yep, that pretty much wraps it up. So thanks for listening and have a good one.